Thank you for joining Positive Connections Radio. We appreciate your support and thank you for listening. This is episode 65, recorded on 5/2/2022. And I want to introduce you all to my friend, Kelley Hattox. Kelley has been a constant positive influence in my life and personal recovery program for the last 9 years. I hold overwhelming gratitude that she agreed to come on the show and share her strength, courage, and downright positive vibes with us all. Enjoy the podcast and reach out to her if you or someone you know needs help. Here's her bio. After a long career in Hollywood entertainment, Kelley found herself needing to get sober and needing to change her career paths. She is a CADC-II, ICADC counselor, a certified professional coach, and a certified relationships coach with specializations in co-occurring disorders and complex relational family dynamics. She has worked in all levels of care, including crisis intervention, residential, outpatient, and private coaching. She has presented webinars and workshops for organizations across the country and is passionate about community education. Her mission is to help substance use disorder treatment evolve into a de-stigmatized health arena with universal standards and improved outcomes. You can get a hold of her at Kelley Hattox Consultation at gmail.com. That's KELLEY HATTOX consultation at gmail.com. Enjoy the show. Welcome to Positive Connections Radio. This is Mike Cook. This podcast is directed towards first responders and others who may be suffering in silence and are fearful to ask for help. You're not alone. You don't have to lose it all in order to get help. Trust yourself, stand up, and break the stigma. No, this is my garage.
Wow, you never know it's a garage. That's a great camera angle, and I love the paper room dividers. That's a great idea, and I've seen that flying V painting before.
Have you? Where?
True North. It was in your office.
Oh my God, that's right. I forgot about that. I love that thing. My daughter painted it like years ago.
I remember. It's really cool.
How you been?
Good. It's so good to see you.
You too.
Yeah, I'm good. It's a good year so far.
Yeah.
How about you? How are you doing?
It's good. It's going good. It's really busy. It's busy at my job and busy working with first responders and yeah, it's great. What have you been up to?
I got a new puppy. That's the main thing.
Yeah.
Like I'm a first-time mom.
Oh, that's great.
It's really been nice. But work-wise, so I stopped doing interventions in around October. I was doing some really awesome intervention work with an agency that is great. I still love them and think they're great. But man, that is hard work.
Oh, doing interventions?
Yeah, it was a very, the organization I was with had a pretty broad focus. So we weren't just doing substance use, we were doing mental health, organizational stuff, and like really high acuity. Yeah. And it was fascinating work, but it was very hard. And we used a family systems approach and an invitational approach. We weren't that sort of group that like tricks somebody into coming into a room and then everybody says like, do this or else,
They swarm them with their letters and
get in the van or we'll never talk to you again. Like that's just traumatizing and
exactly.
We've both worked at agencies where people admit after interventions like that, and you just have to spend the first whole chunk of time like untangling the betrayal trauma and all of the stuff that they're feeling until they can even get to the real disorder. So we had a different approach, but it's slow. It's it takes rapport building, it takes time. And it was just,
You were flying all over the place too. I remember seeing you were postings and stuff, and you're like every other weekend you were like in some other state.
You're there everywhere. The good part is that I got to work with a lot of the best professionals around the country. I got to work with treatment centers and doctors and teams of the highest caliber all over the country. And like, what a gift that was to just be inspired by like really high-end work that's happening out there.
Yeah.
But it's not, I'm not built for it, right? Like not everyone's built for that level of like crisis intervention, right? Like I just don't have that kind of shielding. Like I'm not.
Well, tell everybody how because this podcast is. I mean, you're my friend. I haven't seen you like in person for a couple of years at least before COVID even hit. But we met back in 2013 when we started going to college together, and
13 or 12. Like it's been almost a decade, right?
Right. Well, that's when I started my recovery process in 2012. So it's been about 10 years right now, a little over 10 years in recovery.
Congratulations. Yeah. So I'm at 9.5. So we're like right there.
Isn't it great working in this field though, to be able to help other people too?
It's really beautiful. Like we got to go, I'm still friends with so many of the colleagues that we had in school. And
really?
Yeah. And that and I'm still networked into our college substance use disorder, like the AODS program, alumni group, like all of that. So, and everybody's working in such like diverse ways. And it's so neat to see how our little core group has just woven through the community and is doing so much good work. But yeah, it's been a blessing to watch you grow and develop, especially.
Yeah, I know it's been a great road. It really has. And you're one of the positive people in my life from the very beginning, taking class with you. I don't know what class it was, but it was one of the very first ones I took. And you and Patty, bless her soul, but she was a big inspiration too.
She is my guardian angel at all times. And if anybody out there who never got a chance to meet our friend Patty, like she was the bright spot in a lot of the people's recovery in the San Diego community and elsewhere. She had roots all over the place. Yeah,
she was amazing. She had a amazing story, amazing life, and she was brought light to the room everywhere she went. So
she was the first person I met in San Diego in recovery that knew some of the same people I knew from the old punk rock world and from some really gritty times and it was great. Like I could really connect to her in a lot of ways. And she was so devoted to helping others in a way that had a humility that is just really rare to find. Like I offered her jobs a couple of times and she's like, no, I think I need to like work on the street level. I think I need to stay where I am.
She was so humble and she was so caring for everybody. She was a bright light. She's an amazing person. You went way too quickly. Definitely. But so I know you're a little bit of your history. How did you get to where you're at right now? What transpired through your life? Because every time I see you always have these new Facebook postings, and I go on Facebook a lot. I don't post a whole bunch of stuff. However, I do see your feed sometimes.
Oh, so you're a lurker. You're in there low-key lurking.
I'm a little stalker. Well, sometimes you just I don't need to respond to things. I want to respond, but sometimes it's just better not to. Sure. But I give a lot of likes out and loves out. And, especially hearing about your stories and the people that you've met and the life that you've led going up to this point. It's just, it's astounding. It really is.
Yeah. I mean, I just had my 50th birthday and, everyone's like, oh, how does it feel to be 50? And I was like, I've crammed like 112 years into 50. So it actually feels fine. I've had a very full life.
Yeah.
Like just in a nutshell, I mean, I grew up very sheltered and in a very conservative household, lots of extreme religious imposition, almost like a cult,
Oh, wow.
like if it's possible to be Catholic and in a cult, like that's where we were. Like
Really?
we didn't have any experience outside of our church. Like even our babysitters and stuff were like, we'd go to the rectory and the convent, and we did like church service every weekend, and it was just very devoted. But when
Everybody
we
you knew where it was in a church. You didn't know anybody from the outside.
oh no, no, I didn't even know until much later that other religions existed.
Was this in
Uh,
California?
No, it was in Washington State, but then we moved to California and I saw things I had never seen before outside of my bubble. And I think I was in like 6th or 7th grade, and I was just like, holy shit, give me all of it. Like, I want
Really?
all of this. I want rock and roll. I want sugar. I want to stay out after dark. Like, I want all of this. And by the time I got into high school, I had found punk rock. I started sneaking out at night. I was all over the place. And I graduated a little early, and I moved to LA, I think when I was 17, from Orange County, and right into Hollywood, and moved in with a guy in a band.
That's typical. It sounds good.
And I just was like off and running, and I lived and worked in Hollywood forever, and I loved it. And my first field I wanted to do, like I went to college, I did go to college, and I was really into psychology. I was a psych major right off the bat, and I was really into social psychology and like persuasion and influence and group thinking. That's still my first love. But like I was all, I'm going to use my powers for evil. And
Really?
I ended up being a publicist for a while, and
Uh-huh.
I
What did you
worked.
do being a publicist? What realm was that?
So I started working at the Viper Room when I was real young. I think I was like 23 or 22. And I ended up staying there for 11 years. And this was when early mid 90s to the 2002 or 3 maybe. So maybe it was like 9 or 10 years. Yeah, like all kinds of stuff was going on then. Like
That must have been crazy, because I heard they're closing it down, or they're destroying
yeah,
it or something. They're getting rid of it. But you must have met
yeah.
so many unique people going through there.
Yeah, it was a really special time in Hollywood history. But there was not gonna lie, like my life included a lot of drugs and alcohol, and I happened to work in like one of the only cultures where like that wasn't, I could have like a vodka and tonic at my desk while I was doing my, or whatever. Like
It was
it wasn't,
acceptable.
yeah, and I had a lot of flexibility, and I could kind of, show up at 11-ish if I wanted to in the
Uh,
morning, and like leave at like 7-ish or whenever. And anyway, so I started noticing that like more and more and more of my drinking friends were like not hanging out with me. Like I had started to like undrink or like outdo my little circle. And and I was in like a pretty hardcore circle.
yeah.
And I just thought they were all lames, like they can't hang. Like I'm leveling up, and they're all pussying out.
Right. You're on a certain level here of abuse and abuse.
So yeah, like I'm trying to raise the bar. I'm adding some pills. I'm adding this or whatever. I'm starting to like do some really high risk activity.
Of course.
And yeah, I mean, I was just all over. I started to sort of fall apart. What I didn't realize until many years later was that many of my friends were getting sober.
Mm.
And this wave of sobriety was hitting Hollywood in a really beautiful way, right? Like it really became normal to admit that you have a problem and seek help. And the arms of Hollywood were wide open for that. I just didn't see it.
Yeah. Was that in the
Um,
2000s or 90?
yeah, like early 2000s, right?
Yeah.
And then so I left that job and just like tumbleweeded all over the place for a while. And then like stuff started really falling apart for me. I started having some major health problems from drinking and drugs. Some really bad circumstances. I got in some really bad scrapes. I started having a lot of trouble with the law. I ended up in San Diego. I met,
We might have crossed paths a couple of times when I was a police officer down there.
oof,
No, I don't think
dude,
so. I don't remember that.
I got stopped. I want to say probably like 18 or 19 times before I actually got arrested, because I was this like educated Asian girl who could talk my way out of almost anything. The last thing an officer would have believed is what was really going on.
Right.
But the truth is, like, I was just in some really dark territory, right? Way over my head. I was that girl who was like, I was always like, I don't even know how to explain it. Like showing up at the crack house with a plate of brownies, like just being an idiot, right? Like I don't know. I don't have hustle. Like I don't have good game. I'm not
Right.
like, but so anyway, I met this guy and we got married. We didn't even know each other. We got married after like 5 weeks or something.
Really?
And yeah, and we're next week we're celebrating our 10-year anniversary.
You're talking about Scott?
Talking about my husband, like, and so I met this other guy who was like also hanging out in like all the worst places, but also seemed to be like have some sort of moral compass and have some sort of like idea that he wanted life to look different,
Right.
and we met one night, and that's a whole other story that I don't share with you in private, but
Okay.
we haven't really been apart except for jail after we met. So like, I think the first year we were together, I think we got arrested 9 times.
Wow.
And
Together?
yeah, together.
Wow.
I had a lot more going on than he did.
Right.
He was kind of like a weekend warrior that could roll hard and then like sort of pull it together. I was not. I would roll hard and stay down for a long time. But so eventually, and at the same time I was getting 5150 and I was in and out of the ER, and I was just like, my husband met me at the worst. Like there was nobody in the world that was going to look at me and go, that's my girl.
A shit show behind a dumpster fire.
Oh God, for real. I was, living at this point, I had gone from my big home in Hollywood to living in and out of motels, sometimes living in my car, just not doing legal stuff, right?
Right.
Really having a hard time. So then finally the judge was like, the last 3 times I gave you bail, you did not come back. So your bail days are done, little lady. and sent me to jail. I'd never like really been in jail more than overnight. And I got locked up for about 5 months.
Wow, Kelly.
I know.
What was that like? Being the prisoner now?
Not fucking good. I'll tell you that. Because I realized I belonged there when I was being walked through on day 1 from the intake section to my dorm. And I could, at the time I had like bright fuchsia pink hair. I was really recognizable, right? So I was walking, carrying all my stuff to my dorm, and I could hear girls in the yards as I was walking by going, Kelly.
Kidding me.
And I was like, oh fuck, I totally belong here.
Uh-huh.
Because I want to be that, like, I don't belong here. I'm a nice girl. But I totally belonged there. And so at the time, San Diego Women's Jail, Las Colinas, had an experimental treatment dorm. And when I signed up there, when I got there, I signed up on day 1 to be transferred there because one of the girls had told me that for the probation department will like double your time. Like you'll get like 3 days for 1 if you're in the treatment dorm,
Okay.
Which it wasn't true, but I did it anyway because totally self-serving motives, right? Sure. Like get me out of here, get me back to the streets as soon as possible. And but it took forever for me to be seen. And after several weeks in there, I think it was about 2 months, I had completely forgotten I had ever signed that thing. And I had still been getting high and getting drunk in jail. And I remember the day I had nothing left to trade. I had been doing drawings and writing for people to send in their letters, and then they would like give me a little bit of whatever.
Right.
And then I remember like the day I had nothing left. Like I had given away everything I had. I had a good pair of socks left. And like in jail, like those little things mean a lot, right? Like a good pair of socks or a good sheet or something like that. And I traded my pair of socks to a girl who had just come in, who had smuggled a couple, pills in. And I remember like I just got 1/4 of one line of something. She didn't even know what it was. She wouldn't even tell me.
Right.
And I remember sitting back down on my bunk and being like, I don't have anything left.
You traded your socks for drugs.
I'm done. Like, where the hell do I go from here? Like, do I kill myself? Like, I don't know. Like,
right.
This is, and then like, I really was thinking that the idea of like any other alternative didn't really occur to me. And as I was sitting there, like about 20 minutes after that transaction, my name got called on the overhead and I got transferred to the recovery dorm. And,
amazing. Just in the nick of time, seems like
it makes me want to cry still today. I've told this story a lot, but it's so powerful. Because definitely there was I had even called my dad and like I had called everyone on the phone and said the last I love yous and all of the things I wanted to say and all of that. And I knew like it was a low, like I've had a lot of lows, but that was a low like I've never had before. Right. And, call it God or the universe or whatever, but something was at that moment was like, picked me up. And so I packed all my stuff up that day and went over to the treatment dorm. And the next morning is my sober date. And
it was like it's more like talking about interventions, like a spiritual type of intervention. If you can relate to that, for sure.
So powerful. And I got in there and I was like, tell me what to do. I'll do it. And it was such a cool dorm. It was run by a group called Welcome Home Ministries that is still around. The dorm had all these rules, like no sleeping during the day, no swearing, no, like in jail. Right. And then all these girls were doing it. They were like, we don't want to come back here. Like we want to change. Right. And I'm still friends with a lot of those women today who've gone on to impact their own communities positively. And I was able to finish I had a year sentence and the judge allowed me to finish it in a probation approved facility, which I did in Escondido. And then after I completed the program, I went back there for 2 years and continued volunteering as a peer support specialist. And
I think I know what place you're talking about.
Yeah, it's a big joint. It's a 98-bed residential facility. And it's one of the few that takes children too. So there's a lot of CPS involved. There's a lot of parole and probation, a lot of at the time it was county funded. Now it's run a little bit differently, but one of the counselors there, they helped a lot of people. They're like a partner with the fellowship, which is the men's center.
Right.
And then one of the counselors there told me that I should go to school. She's like, go back to school and be a counselor. Like you can do this, and she gave me an opportunity to come help. And she had me start co-facilitate. Like I got my RADT right away and she let me come in and start co-facilitating some groups. And I didn't have that much time. I think I had like 6 or 9 months of sobriety at that point. But she really believed in me. And she said, you can do this. And so I did. And I went to school and I met you. And I have been super lucky since then to have worked at some of the most amazing agencies. I got to work with you at True North Recovery in Kansas.
Well, you were remarkable, and people don't really realize what a remarkable person you are. You are extremely intelligent, and you would probably say that you're not, but you're very humble about that. You are, and it is just, I am so grateful that happened with you. and we were able to meet and actually work together too, and stay sober and work on our recovery also, because that's a huge part of my life. Not everybody gets it. Not everybody is willing to, take that chance and surrender to the fact that I can't do this alone. It's take one step at a time. Definitely.
Yeah, can't do it alone and shouldn't do it alone, right? Like, we're hardwired to be tribal creatures. We're not supposed to like endure a challenge individually, right? We're wired to rely on the strength of the tribe.
Right.
And
Well, addiction pulls us away from it. The opposite of addiction is connection. If we don't have that connection, my drug, my alcohol, my mental health issues, whatever it is I'm dealing with, it wants me to take me away from you. It wants me to take away from the group. I want to seclude myself and isolate, and that gets to a really dark place. And I choose not to go there anymore.
I have conflicted feelings about Johann Hari's premise around connection and recovery, but I do believe that you can't have quality recovery without community, right? You just can't. Like, an addiction is the petri dish addiction is grown in isolation, right? Like, I always use the analogy that addiction is like an abusive relationship, right? The first thing it wants to do is isolate you from support. And then the control mechanisms start, right? And then it starts to tell you who you should hang out with, or how you spend your money, or where you can go. And before you know it, like, it's telling you when to eat and when to sleep and when to shower, until the only thing you need is that addiction, and anything that tries to come in between you and it is the enemy. And
that's a great analogy. I love that.
Yeah, there's some research that just came out that's so interesting too, around addictions, specifically like narcotics and amphetamines and oxytocin, right? I just dove into this world of research, but it's more than just a metaphor about the relationship we have with addiction, because it looks like what happens is that, so when the addictions really got a hold of your brain and you're like, mesolimbic dopamine reward system has been hijacked, right? We talk about dopamine all the time, but like with dopamine, addiction kind of like kicks the door down and it says, give me all you got in there now. And with oxytocin, it's like a little more subtle. It like sort of like knows the password and gets you to open the door yourself. So it creates this metabolic sequence that tricks the body into releasing oxytocin. So you actually are having this like hormonally bonding experience with the substance, but not just with the substance, with the procedure of preparing the substance, with the environment of the substance, right? Rituals, location, and the substance itself, right? So when you're separated from the substance, it's no different than being separated in like a life-threatening way from a relationship that feels secure and protective.
Of course.
And so there's some clinical trials going on right now about oxytocin replacement therapy and recovery, because this is thought to be like a main reason people relapse, is this like what we describe as, it's a longing, but it's more than that. It's more than a craving. It's like an emptiness, a sadness.
That's exactly right. I was going to say that is like an emptiness, is a void.
Yeah.
And a lot of times when we give up something or say, okay, I'm not going to drink anymore, I'm going to start working a program, I never want to drink again, just be sober for today. It's like saying goodbye to a best friend. It's like saying goodbye to a lover, someone you've had this very intimate relationship with for so long, and that's all it fails in comparison to what you're so used to, because that's your security blanket.
So you nailed it on the head. It's grief, right? But grief on a profound level, like grief that that a non-alcoholic or a non-addict would struggle to understand unless they've had that sort of incredible loss of, because for most of us, at the point that we disconnect from our substance, it's because become the only relationship we have, right?
Right.
It's not like the loss of one of your good friends, or like a family member. It's the only relationship we have. It was the relationship that felt necessary to survival.
Mm-hmm.
So the loss of that is so profound, and good treatment centers do work around grief and loss, and
Of course.
mourning the addiction, and being okay without it on a deeply emotional level.
One of the best things that happened in my recovery, and this was early on when I went to rehab in beginning of 2012, and they made it. Well, I guess they sort of made us, but I guess it was my choice to do it. A goodbye letter.
Yeah.
And that's another thing too. I know you laugh about that. If they would have forced me to say, okay, you have to, get a program of recovery, and you have to do these 12 steps, and you have to believe in God, and you have to get a sponsor, and you have to go to meetings, and you have to read this book. So my head was definitely in a different space. However, and that was contempt prior to investigation. I never really investigated any kind of recovery programs.
Well, I have some contempt after investigation too. Like, I'm not gonna lie.
What about? Tell me about that.
I've struggled a little bit with some of the 12-step, I wouldn't call it contempt, but
yeah.
I definitely have questions. I definitely see areas for targeted growth. I've been doing a lot of writing about it. I have about a 300-page book that's ready for publication about it.
Are you kidding me? Is it titled Contempt After?
No, I think I'm going to call it the handrail. So it can be, if you're struggling with some 12-step concepts, like maybe this will help you get through them. Maybe.
Okay.
Kind of like the handrail on a staircase, like steps.
Tell me about the contempt. I really, this is a whole way of thinking for me. I didn't even think of it.
I don't know that it's the fundamentals of the program, but I think sometimes in application, the organization gets very dogmatic, right? And I think that there was an entire intention early on for this to not be religious, right? For it not to be applied with that fundamental zeal, right?
Right.
And I think sometimes that's a spirit that, everything you need to know is right here in these pages and blah, 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 blah. Like, for many people, that's true. And for some people, that's not true. And I think that, even Bill Wilson himself made like a lot of space for outside support and professional help and other resources. And, I think the book is a great historical document in a lot of ways. I think in some areas, like, for example, obviously like the Two Wives chapter and the Family Afterwards chapter are best read through the framework of like historical perspective, right?
Of the 30s, of course. You ever watch I Love Lucy?
Yeah.
It's just unbelievable. That's how the society was. It really was.
Yeah, I mean, there are lines in there that say things like, you must bear the burden of resolving most disagreements, and you should never criticize your husband, and cheerfully see him through more sprees. And I don't think that translates very well today as an instruction manual. But then you also have people who are like wanting the book to be applied literally and in a sort of biblical way, right? Like that it's sacrosanct. And I think in doing that, it loses sight of inclusivity. It loses sight of diversity. Even just calling it the two spouses chapter or the two partners chapter would go a long way, right?
Well, like you said, historically, and that's all they knew back then in the 30s to write about. It was just like us writing a book about recovery right now. And, 70 years from now, they look back at, 2022 and say, what were they thinking?
Yeah, totally.
It's just like things are so different now. We don't think that way anymore. However, I look at it this way, working those steps, those 12 steps that I thought personally was a book that had 12 chapters, and you'd graduate and you'd like turn your certificate into the court and you would like complete the program of Alcoholics Anonymous.
And then you'd be fixed.
And then it would be done. Yeah. Or you can continue drinking, and maybe learn how to drink like a proper high society.
Yeah, like going to traffic school, right? Like here, I corrected the problem. Thank you. Give me my license back.
Exactly. Here's $35 for whatever the class was. But yeah, and I based it on this. It's just I understand for me, it has to be spiritual. I have to like accept some kind of spiritual connection to this universe, right?
Mhm.
No one knows why we're here. A lot of people have speculations, and a lot of people go into different religions, right? That want to follow someone that says that this is what it's all about. But I know I don't think it's possible that we can really understand what's going on. That's the first part of it. So this connection, I had to be honest and truthful to myself, and then letting go of resentments, right? Working with other people, getting your secrets out,
Mm.
and then being willing to make amends to other people, and so you can get rid of those resentments. And once you do that, meditation and mindfulness and giving back, it all sort of fits into a perfect program for me, where if I say God, I'm not talking about your God or whatever it is. It's my connection. That's just the only word I know how to describe what it is. I could
Mhm.
say spirit, I could say higher power, I can say whatever it is. And it scares a lot of people away. And it scared me away because I wasn't in any kind of cult, I guess I'm sure you're asking, but did go to church when I was a kid, and it was based on, Catholic church. And I didn't really buy into it at all. And I was definitely shied away in my teenage years and rebellion years. But finding this program, that's what kept me away from it. I'm thinking, okay, they're holding these meetings in these, closed down churches, and they're renting out space,
Yeah.
and they're holding hands.
And like, no lie, there are a lot of vestigial traces of Christianity in the
Yeah,
program.
of course.
But that's there's space for it to, the broad highway, right? The hoop we're asking you to jump through is wider than you think, it says.
Mhm.
And my higher power is very similar to yours. And when I use the term spirituality, I use it in a very broad sense, right? Meaning, are you living in a life of integrity based on values with some sense of purpose, meaning, and connectedness in your world, right? That's it.
Right.
And in practicing that on a daily basis, I experience God, right? But I also don't believe I understand a definition of it, nor am I like capable of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I think that the God thing is one of the I've worked, with a lot of people who come into recovery and they say, I'll do anything except the 12 steps, right? Like, I'm not into the God thing. That's not my jam.
Right.
And I understand that. I think it's the number one reason people turn away from that program, which is, I understand it. And also, like, it's the most accessible. There are so many regions of the country that don't have access to refugee or SMART or alternatives.
Mhm.
Um, so I think, we can do what we can to make sure that we're inclusive to people of all faiths or no faith or alternative faith or God, whatever he, she, it, or they might
Yeah.
be, right? A ton of research has come out about spiritual factors in recovery from medical issues and mental health issues. The
Mhm.
Mayo Clinic just released a report a couple of years ago that did like a broad spectrum analysis on spiritual factors in medical recovery.
Mhm.
And it found that recovery rates for medical issues went up much higher when people had spiritual belief systems. And it wasn't because God made them better. It was because if you have a belief that your life has purpose or that you're connected or that life has meaning, you're more likely to be hopeful in your own recovery, be
Right.
compliant with the recommended regimens, be encouraged and enthusiastic about the process of your recovery, physical therapy or whatever it is, because you believe in your own in the meaning of your existence, right?
Mhm.
So I thought that was pretty interesting to read. If nothing else, like, your life will get better from living in spiritual values.
I don't fear a lot anymore. And
That's right. I'm in a step study, and we were meeting on Friday about the fourth step and what does fearlessness mean. Somebody said, I think fearlessness for me means being honest with myself. And like, I was like, whoa, that's such a good term, such a good definition.
yeah.
What you were saying, right? Like the inability to look at ourselves in reality kept
Right.
us drunk and high,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
You know.
We didn't like ourselves. I mean, I'll speak for myself. I didn't like myself. I didn't like where my life was going, or the things that I've done or what was done to me and all that through life. And I held that in, and to actually take a look at myself and figure out that if the only person that I could be honest with and trust is me, that I'm okay with that. And to have that hope that things will get better because I get better. And that's the biggest thing. There's still things that go on in life in recovery, active recovery. And although I look at things differently, I look at things with a different lens,
My drama scale is very different today than it was before. Like having a bad day today, that means, like I've left the coffee pot on and the bottom of it got burned and god dang it, it doesn't mean like I'm on life support.
No, no, you
But
didn't mean your whole day, right? What do you do when something like that happens?
yeah, it's my responsiveness is very different today. But one of the things you touched on that I've been doing a lot of work around with my clients lately is the idea that trusting ourselves takes time in recovery. It's I think a lot of people, there's like a lot of spiritual stuff in our culture right now. And it's memes and it's a way of dressing and it's like a way to decorate your house, right? It's not, there's a spiritual aesthetic that's like trending right now, right?
Is there?
Yeah, for sure. Like for sure, like I have a ton of like quote normie friends that do all kinds of like super interesting spiritual healing practices that I just didn't see like 10 years ago or 20 years ago, but I think that part of that is this language that like your highest guide is your own intuition and always trust your intuition.
Right.
I think that's true for many of us, but I know at least for me and for a lot of my clients, when we come into recovery, there's no distinction between trauma response and intuition. My first reaction is usually in my early recovery was a protective mechanism based on my past trauma, which is not the same as my intuition. And in recovery, it takes time for us to heal that reactivity and to sort of build the replacement tools we have to be able to quiet down our nervous system and listen to ourselves carefully. And then we can get in touch with our highest consciousness. But it's usually not like in early recovery, I see people make decisions that just quote like intuitively feel right. And they're just way off base, like they're
how do we know the difference? We're so used to doing one thing, and intuition is like you think it's the normal response, and we make these mistakes. That's why it's good to have
community.
People like you on their team where they can sort of guide them and give them suggestions and say, you know what, when they first told me when I first got into recovery, it's like maybe week 1 or week 2 in a recovery. And they said, just remember, don't trust your first thoughts. It's wrong. Yeah. And I was like, did you actually tell me that? Did you say that my first thought is wrong? You know who I am in my head? Terminal uniqueness comes up, that I was like this guy. Yeah, I've lost everything in my life and I'm in freaking rehab. I'm that guy now. And I'm telling you that my first thought is right. They said, your second thought, it's probably not right. You want to talk about someone, and then they'll go for the third thought and with somebody else and make that decision. And it's really, really true, because I don't know what's right. I don't know what's real when I'm still
true.
A lot of stuff.
And if you ever watched Who Wants to Be a Millionaire?
I used to watch
speaking, ask the audience lifeline had the highest ratio of being correct.
Right.
Because a group opinion is going to weigh more heavily in favor of correctness, usually on like objective things, right? Maybe not on stuff like politics or whatever, but
right.
I mean, I was lucky enough to be trained by some really brilliant minds in our field. And so I struggle a little bit with the idea that like, I think what you're saying is true. Those messages are true. Like in early recovery, check your reactions, check your thinking, get feedback, seek guidance, seek mentorship. But I don't like the secondary message that sometimes comes with that like your brain is your enemy, or your own worst enemy, or your best thinking got you here, or in and of yourself, you are nothing. And like all of these sort of, like, I know that if I believed I was my own worst enemy, I would have a very hard time taking care of myself. I have to lovingly tend to myself smartly and with compassion. And I need to be friends with myself in order to do that.
Yeah.
But I think that messaging sometimes happens in application. It's not part of the fundamentals, but I've heard it many times in the rooms, sort of like, of myself, I am nothing, but with God, I am everything, like that sort of thing. And I think the way I reframe that is that God has helped me discover how wonderfully I'm made, right? I'm not nothing. None of us are nothing. None of us ever were nothing. Even in our darkest days, none of us have ever been nothing. We've always been worthy.
Yes. I believe that too. And some of those things also got me a little bit in the beginning too. And especially even in the field of psychotherapy or counseling or whatever, and you could do a lot of good and you could do a lot of harm to people the way you approach them and how your recovery program is. When you are talking to a counselor, and this is a personal experience of me or a therapist, it was, and I was saying, whatever my issues were at that time, and they say it, and then something like well look where you're at, or something like that. I forgot the term, and I'm like, or how's that working for you? And I hated that. I'm like,
oh yeah, that's a Dr. Philism.
Oh, how's that working? All right. Yeah.
I had a therapist say to me one time, I was like stressing about I had a lot of anxiety, and we were talking about like the news and TV, and he said, just turn it off. I can't remember what was happening at the time. Something big was in the news at the time. And I was like, you know what, like, that doesn't feel like an option to me. And he goes, I don't watch the news, and who's better off, me or you?
Right. No, what the hell's going on?
I was like, doctor, I'm sorry. And he goes, well, I'm just saying, I'm doing a little better than you are. And I was like, wow, I freaking hate you. Exactly. You're absolutely right. The messaging is so subtle. And I have had things that professionals have said to me that were so uneventful and unrelated to the big things that stuck with me forever.
Yeah, it's condescending, some of it too. And I don't know if they're just used to saying that to people. So I look in my career and talking to people, I try to better myself every day. And I try to better myself by leading by example, but also taking in things from other people like you, like people I've known in recovery that I respect and I think are really good, honest people that are solid in the recovery.
It's been a hard challenge for me to really I shouldn't say it's been a hard challenge. I've done a lot of work to make sure that my personal beliefs around recovery and my professional approach are clearly separated.
That's important too. That's important in recovery, that you don't use your career or your job working in recovery as your recovery program.
And I think, unfortunately, the treatment industry is filled with people who apply what worked for them because it worked for them. Right. And I think that it's just a big point of contention for me in the industry, because that prevents us from growth. It prevents us from being in a state of parity with other medical and mental health disorders. It keeps us stuck in old ways of thinking. And it creates contempt within the industry between professionals with different approaches. I've worked with people who are in 12-step programs and apply 12-step programs in the way they dispense treatment.
Right.
With kind of an attitude that this is the thing that'll work for you.
Right. All or nothing, you know.
All or nothing. And then I've seen other people on the other end of the spectrum that only do, secular science-based approaches, and also have the same sort of distrust and distaste for spiritual approaches. What the evidence seems to indicate is that as long as you have voluntary engagement on an ongoing basis, right? So you're getting up, you're driving somewhere, you're actually committing to recovery in that way. You have some sort of facilitated process of life examination, damage repair, and replacement tools, and some sort of non-judgmental supportive peer group. Your odds in any of those are about the same, right? We just have more data from 12 steps because there's a bigger volume, there's a bigger census to work with. But, the last year, 2021, this report came out that I'm just talking about all the time. It was, I think there were like 7 or 8 authors on it, and it was published in the Journal of Neuropsychopharmacology, but then it was like reprinted in the Journal for the National Institute of Health. It was reprinted in Nature magazine. And it basically like scolded the entire treatment community and said, look, you guys, like if anybody Googles what percentage of people on this substance recover, you're going to come up with 50 conflicting peer review studies that all look legit.
Right.
And that all have like radically different outcomes. And it basically said, you guys, we've been calling this a disease for 80 years. We've been using the disease model that the base of the disorder is functional and structural brain differences, right? That we can classify as a disease. We said that we established that in 1956. And the disease model in a nutshell, this goes like you have an organ that experiences a damage or injury, which creates symptoms. And then the treatment of the root damage alleviates the symptoms, right? So we got up to like step 3 and then like stopped. We've been treating the symptoms ever since. And because of that, like we have all these conflicting approaches. We have all this conflicting data. None of it, people aren't even on the same page in our industry about what a positive outcome means, or what recovery means, or what the disease. There's even dispute within our industry about whether or not addiction should be approached as a disease, even though the AMA, the APA, and the World Health Organization all agree it should, right?
I know there's a lot, and it always bugged me about the word disease. It really hit me wrong. And what I usually say now is it's an injury. Your body's injured, and we have to work on where that injury is so we can help heal it. And then those symptoms will go away. And of course, we are treat, he's a drug addict and he needs this and that, and, give him some of this and, patch him up and send him on his way again. But we're not working on any underlying trauma. We all have trauma in our lives, whether we want to admit it to it or not.
I think the big cultural fear is that addicts will use the disease model as an excuse for behavior. Okay?
Yeah. I have no choice. I have to use.
You guys don't understand. I have a disease.
Yeah, man.
And I think that's true. Like we'll latch on to whatever we can, right? Like you don't understand. I have childhood trauma, or you don't understand. I have a learning disorder. And we'll latch on to whatever we can to defend the disorder, which is a symptom of the disease, right? That brain, like, not to get too technical, but we're in bottom up functionality, right? The midbrain is running the show, and all of this like complex strategy is basically just in operation to keep the drug seeking mechanisms continuing to happen in the body because survival has been linked to the drug, right?
Yeah.
But it's people relapse mostly because the brain impairment's not addressed sufficiently. There's post-acute withdrawal is a real thing. It's the brain and body's attempts to rebalance homeostatically in the absence of the substance. And it's probably the number one reason people relapse,
We don't realize that. We lose that sense of maybe who we were before we started the substance or activity or wherever we were, or whatever trauma we might have faced. And we just remember that, and our body it could take up to 2 years to actually, get back to homeostasis.
Oh, absolutely. And so that's what this report was saying. It was saying, you guys, we have to get on the same page, like CBT, DBT therapy, all of that is incredibly important. And this, right? Like, and this, like, we need to get on the same page about looking at a universal approach the way other disorders do, and treating our clients differently, treating our patients differently. You know, we wouldn't tell the family of someone with depression, like, I just don't know if he was really ready to feel better. You know,
Right.
I don't know if he really.
We do sometimes too. You know, we wouldn't tell a survivor of whatever it is, like some kind of injury or maybe broken leg or a broken back, say, oh, okay, well, you know what, we'll put a cast on it, you'll be fine. There's rehabilitation that needs to be done with it. And I think a lot of this gets halted with the stigma still out there.
Oh, totally.
Like, oh, that's an alcoholic, that's a drunk, you know, I don't drink like that person. I'm going to compare myself to you because I want to continue doing what I'm doing, but I'm going to look at other people that are doing a lot worse, especially in Hollywood. I mean, how many years are there when a Hollywood hero goes down, like, oh, they're in addiction and they've lost this and that or whatever? At least I haven't gone that far yet. And it gives me approval to continue what I'm doing and not really work on myself, because that takes a lot of work.
Yeah. And I mean, the truth is, like, for every Robert Downey Jr., there's 20 Charlie Sheens. When it comes to Hollywood, we forget how hard it is for someone to get help, you know, and how terrifying it is for somebody's entire identity to potentially become linked with addiction. So that's that sort of those vestiges of the morality argument, you know, that this is a problem for weak-willed bad people with, you know, poor character.
It's a character defect, right? Flip the script a little bit, though. Instead of saying you're a person dealing with, you know, addiction, you're a person that's in recovery, active recovery. And
in an ideal world, I mean, I have utmost respect for the principles and the traditions of 12-step programs, but I would love to see a day without anonymity. I would love to see a day of public recovery that normalizes the process, because I think what I see right now is, I was just talking to a friend of ours about this. The fear in the recovery community is that if somebody is public about their recovery and relapse, it'll deter people from believing it can work, right? Yeah. But I actually believe the opposite. I believe that that's a very realistic picture, because this is, for most people, a nonlinear journey. What we know, though, is that for people who've had a taste of recovery, relapses tend to be shorter in duration. The consequences are lower in severity, and there's a quicker return to recovery. And they know where to go. They know who to ask. They know who to talk to.
What about the comebacks too, like post-traumatic growth? I mean, what have you learned from relapse, and you're moving forward? Look at that part of it.
I always have my clients do what I call a relapse autopsy, and we kind of break it down and say, like what happened, what led up to it. Okay, like, let's really understand it. Let's like do detective work on it. This isn't a moral thing. Let's like break it apart and see what's inside. And then, you know, what do we learn from it? Like, let's take away something from this, because this event is important, you know?
Yeah. Kelly, the therapeutic detective.
But like, I just want to disconnect from that whole, you know, there's a lot of places where that moral argument is still stuck. And I think that, I don't know, I could go on and on about it. There are pockets of culture where it's even more so. I come from the Asian community, and I know for Asian people, the recovery rates are really low. Because there is still this stigma around seeking help, right?
Of course. Yeah.
And all these factors around pride and shame, and, you know.
Well, you know what? I know it is changing. It is really changing. I'm seeing it a lot. I'm seeing it in the first responder community. Number one, it's really turning around, because we've got great people out there, you know, working with departments all over the country, to show them, hey, there's help if you need it. and it's a lot of it's word of mouth too. It's like, okay, well, what was this place like, or what, what was your experiences like? And I think moving forward, it's going to get better. And taking anonymous out of it. I'm not anonymous about anything. I don't have any secrets. To anonymous me, it sounds like, oh, I got a secret. I got to go to these little meetings in a closed room, and it just doesn't feel right to me. I'm very open, but I don't. It's my program. I'm not going to tell anybody else that they have to be open and talk about the recovery. However, if I talk to somebody and they start talking recovery jargon, and I can say, they seem to have their stuff together and they seem to be pretty nice. I'll ask them, are you in recovery? I mean, are you in whatever? And most of the times my intuition is right, because I'm not doing anything now to cloud my perception of my reality. And so I could sort of use my,
what's the version of Gaydar for recovery? We have to come up with a name for it.
Okay, do it. That's a good one.
But I feel you too. I'm the same way. I work in one setting. I work in a couple of agencies right now, but one of them is relationship coaching, and the majority of the people in my organization are not in recovery. But I'm very open about myself, and I'm also in a 12-step group that's not substance oriented, that's about something else.
Of course. And there's hundreds of them like that. It's just the basis of 12-step group, right?
Yeah, I remember when I first got sober, I saw how many there were, and I was like obsessed with finding the right one for me. And I went to Cocaine Anonymous. Well, then maybe it's Heroin Anonymous, maybe it's Pills Anonymous, and maybe it's like I found Chronic Pain Anonymous. I didn't have any chronic pain. I just thought maybe I'm constantly like uncomfortable. Maybe that's it. But I went to like 12 different kinds of meetings, and eventually I just landed in AA. It felt like where it had the people, it's where I found modeling, I guess I'll say. Like, so it's where I found people solving problems the way I wanted to solve problems, I guess. Yeah. But I think a lot of those other fellowships are amazing. But I go to one that's for something else, and I was in there, and I just like threw out some things about my history, and the ladies in my group were like, you just said that out loud, right? You just say that, right? You just say that you did that. And I'm like, I sure do, because I did. And like,
you're as sick as your secrets, right? If you have these secrets that you're not going to tell another human being.
I mean, and if I were still stuck, right? If my life still looked really shitty, I might feel differently. But because of, I've had this, like you described, this post-traumatic growth, like this real gift of being able, and it's directly because of a commitment to help others, right? Like if I would have just kept my focus on how can I keep climbing my personal ladder,
right.
I don't know if I would feel that way, but because my life has turned out the way it has, I really do feel comfortable talking about, I used to be there. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah. And you could talk about it openly without worrying about things. I mean, I could be a part of any 12-step program, saying the right thing the wrong way, anonymous. I mean, I've that's one of my character defects that I'm working on currently. And I say the right things, but it depends on my presentation, right? It's very important that you have that rapport with other people that you're speaking with. And I'm still a lot of coppish in a lot of ways, but hey, I want to coppish. Yeah, the way I approach things, I guess it's ingrained. It's the training and experience.
How do you knock on a door?
Oh, with my foot. Yeah, that's exactly how I do it. So
I love what you do. I love what you've done. You've grown the area of first responder supports so beautifully, and you've definitely made an impact.
Yeah, thank you. I love it. I love having you on the show too. What are you doing right now? I mean, what are you doing in life, and you want to put anything out there to the?
I don't know. Well, I'm working at a couple different companies. I switched from the intervention work. So I took about 6 months off and just did some restoration and focused on myself.
You do some self-care, right?
Yeah, man, that stuff. Yeah, I mean, it was a lot, right? Like I was doing full family systems work, so it was a lot, right? And so I did that for, I think, like 2.5 years, maybe 3 years, and then took a break. And that's just a kind of work that most people take a break from
Yeah.
because it is a lot of crisis work. And we were doing like boots on the ground crisis intervention.
Yeah.
So anyway, so during that time, our friend Jessica Yaffa, you know her, right?
Jessica.
She started ICF accredited relationship coaching certification process. So I got certified through her. And then I also got certified through another organization called Pivot.
Mhm.
And so I work with Jessica right now for those who don't know, Jessica Yaffa is a national name in the areas of relationship health, especially around relationship violence assessment.
Right.
And yeah, she's definitely one of my mentors and a dear friend too.
Mhm.
So I'm certified through her domestic violence assessment and response system. And her partner in that organization is my former clinical director. So I'm super networked into that, the clinical thought that's behind her approach.
Right.
So I work with her at an organization called Sokia Health that's based out of La Jolla, but kind of goes all the way up and down the West Coast and beyond.
Right.
And it's a medical organization that addresses mental health issues. So there's psychiatry, therapy, counseling, coaching. And I just did a webinar for them recently on the brain science of addiction. And I'm going to be doing another one in a couple weeks on stress management and health. I did a lot of webinars and presentations around the country with different organizations during COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm working with Sokia to kind of develop a curriculum for this is sort of the wellness coaching branch there, and excited to be part of that. And I'm also working at this organization called Pivot, which is just relational. It's just it's coaching, it's intensives. They do organizational work, so they come in and work with maybe like the executive level of a corporation around good psychological health internally as an organization, right?
Right. Oh, so they work with whole organizations like businesses and companies?
Yeah, and families and couples and individuals.
And retreat you. I know I looked them up before.
They're amazing. So it's a very focused curriculum that's based on developmental psychology and positive psychology in a way that can be sort of like ethically applied through coaching. Mm-hmm. So I really love that group.
Ethics are huge, by the way. Integrity and ethics, number one in recovery.
Oh yeah, I'm a big like ethics nerd. So I anytime I on board in a company, I'm pretty scrutinous about the ethics, and I have like a lot of questions for them around ethics, and I'm pretty straight up that I've like been sort of an ethics squeaky wheel at companies in the past. It's sort of like I'm never afraid to go up to the top level and say I'm really worried about this.
That's what I love about you. You are so genuine and true in what you do, because you're going to fight for what's right and not just go along with the normal crowd and just sort of cow down to it. Definitely.
Well, I'll fight for what I think is right. Is that always the I work constantly on aligning my opinion with what is objectively right or what is aligned with like universal integrity. But yeah. So thank you for that though. I've it's a double-edged sword, right? Because I don't like looking through the lens of critique all the time. Right. But I do also have a personal vision of raising the level of ethics and integrity in the industry as a whole. Like that's part of my personal mission statement.
Yep. Yeah.
I remember when I was doing intervention, I'd make a recommendation, for a facility or two, and a client would say, "Why? Well, you got a contract with them, you get paid by them," and I'd be like, "Whoa." I again and again, I'd have to do like explain like, well, first of all, if anybody who does that should be
Mhm.
prosecuted or at the very least decredentialed.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And
There's no body, I mean, body brokering and all that kind of stuff, or insurance fraud. Oh hell yeah! At least nowadays, we got some teeth in it. People are actually paying for it. You know, back 8 9 years ago, it was running
yeah,
rampant. But yeah,
yeah.
I get that once in a while. Even some cops and fire guys. Oh yeah, this is a money grab. I'm like, oh really? Okay. Do you understand the whole system of insurance and how much this place costs a month to rent, and what recovery really looks like?
Yeah. I think it's so interesting that you say that because it didn't really get a lot of attention when it was about um, unethical clinical practices or unethical non-credentialed team members or whatever. But when we got into the area of insurance fraud,
Uh-huh.
then the money mattered, right? And so
Right.
that was when we actually started seeing lawsuits come down and arrests happen and stuff. But
Yeah.
it is a field that is for which regulation and oversight is not caught up with yet, right?
No, exactly. Yeah. And it's a stigma so too. It's just those treatment centers, those drug rehabs,
Yeah.
those
Oh,
so
the addict got,
yeah.
they billed for equine instead of CBT. Ooh,
Yeah. Yeah. No. Or they're worried about the flop houses, the sober livings in their community. But if even looking back at my law enforcement career, very rarely did I go to a sober living. And when I did, it was never negative. I went to a lot of flop houses that they were like charging rent for people to do dope in there, whatever dope houses. But
Sure.
it's that negative thought we get, and it's changing that perspective,
That's right. That's
and
right. I mean, the most community oriented and socially conscious people I know are in recovery.
mhm.
Like the people I know who do the most for their communities are former addicts.
And they're so smart and they have such a great way about them, and I trust them.
Yeah.
I trust people in recovery. I trust recovery. I'm not saying everybody is honest in recovery, but it does come out in the wash. It does come out
It's
eventually.
and I know. So my husband and I moved out here to the Palm Springs area like almost 2 years ago, a couple years ago.
Wow, has it been that
And
long?
so it was September 2020. So it was during lockdown. Everything was
Yeah.
closed up. And but we moved here and we met our next door neighbor, this super over the top nice guy. And he was always like, yeah, if you ever need anyone to watch your house or like ask me anything, I know where everything is, or let me do, I'll get your mail if you ever need me to. And just all of this stuff. And then one day he like used a certain phrasing. And I said, are you by any chance in recovery? And he's like, oh yeah, I got 27 years in AA.
Come on in.
And
Here's the
all of a
key.
sudden I was like, that's why you're so cool. And that's why I can trust you. Like,
Right.
yeah, sure. Like now he's our puppy's babysitter. And
That
I
is so
know and I know that he's going to operate with integrity with her, that he's a values-based person.
exactly. If you're running a really good recovery program for yourself, there's not going to be any of that kind of hinky stuff going on. I'm saying, and generally, that's how I run mine. And if anything comes up like that, I want to stop it right away. But yeah, it's just more of you're building something for yourself and giving back.
Mm,
What you don't give away, those kind of terms. I
that's
started to
so
wrap my
true.
head around things. So it's been great having you on the show, Kelly. I know we'll bring it to a wrap. I could probably talk to you for another 3 or 4 hours.
I know. We'll get together soon. Always a joy talking to you. You're one of my favorite people.
You too. I feel the same way. I feel the same way. I always hear people
Mm.
like, I got to have her on my show. And then, procrastination and work takes over. I'm like, I'm just going to call her because I think you have such a great message and you're such a great person to be around.
Mm,
If anybody's ever been around Kelly, that kind of energy that you have for
mm.
being a human, right? Being with other people and giving and just being a really fun person to be around. So thank
Oh,
you so
I
much.
think it's because I have a little chunk of Patty inside me that I take
I know.
everywhere.
I know. Patty was and I love her, Patty Romelli, and we went to the same class too. I think it was like the very beginning. Yeah, she taught me a lot. I think about her very, very, very often. She was a bright light, and she went way too quickly and way too soon, for sure.
Yeah, but we got to sit together at her memorial though, and I've never seen a memorial quite like that. It was packed house, so sad, but so joyful. Just really special.
It was eclectic. There was a lot of people there, you know.
Yeah.
Most people that I didn't know. I mean, that she's known people for, back in her 70s, punk rock days,
She would just be over the moon that you and I are sitting together,
Yes.
Where we are in our lives, having this talk, celebrating recovery and life and change and transformation and all of this joyful shit.
Well, she very well may be very aware of what's going on right now.
That's right.
Who am I to say she isn't? So
thank you so much for everything.
You too. Don't hang up. I'm just going to say goodbye to everybody. Want to say goodbye to everybody? And is there anything else you want to give people that are listening to this?
No, just have a beautiful day and do something kind for yourself, and then do something kind for someone else, and you'll have a great day.
I love that. I love that. Well, guys and girls, can I say guys and girls? I guess I don't. Well, everybody.
Folks.
Everybody have a great week, and thank you so much for listening. I'll talk to you soon. Thanks for listening to Positive Connections Radio on the Mental Health News Radio Network. If you're having issues, you can do it alone. However, you don't have to. It takes courage to ask for help. How can we be there for others if we're unwilling to be there for ourselves? So until next time, be strong, stand up, speak your truth, and break the stigma.